Alright, it's time to make another video. This one is about astrology and whether it's real or not. Is it just pseudoscience? What is pseudoscience? Something somewhat scientific? Make-believe science? I tend to call it a pseudoscience. It's not really a hardcore type of science. You could call it a soft science, but it's also a bit of an art. Okay, one of the problems with astrology is that we tend to get it all backwards nowadays. Astrology is a system of communication that evolved naturally between humans and the universe. It's one of those magical systems that sort of evolved as humans were in touch and in communion with the stars and with nature. If we now take up the practice of astrology and we don't have that contact with nature that our ancestors had, then astrology becomes something we practice for its own sake. We're no longer communing with the stars. We are simply doing astrology for astrology's sake. And you can see how that leaves us sort of cut off from the real power source behind astrology and what it is connecting us to. Any kind of system of language or any kind of system of magic that we use can be seen as a sort of overlay that we project out there onto the world so that what's out there in the world can maybe possibly use that overlay to communicate with us. Okay, so you can see I'm kind of turning the whole thing upside down. You don't necessarily practice astrology for because astrology is fun. You practice astrology because it's your way of communicating and receiving communications from the environment and from, let's say, from the sky. One of the things that scientists have trouble understanding nowadays is that, especially in regard to herbalism, many shamans of indigenous cultures will claim that, well, we came up with this herbal recipe by simply listening to the plants. The plants told us how to make this medicine. We didn't use trial and error to come up with it, and that's very difficult for modern people to understand. When we come up with medicines, we do it by experimentation and by trial and error and refining it over time. I'm sure that's part of how these things developed in the past, but the most important and missing element nowadays is that direct communication with the plants themselves, okay, or direct communication between human beings and nature, and a direct communication between human beings and the sky, the stars, the planets, things like that. Okay, so if you were to practice astrology legitimately, you would first establish contact with the stars by stargazing and going out under the night sky and experiencing the sky arcing overhead, experiencing the seasons firsthand by being out there in nature, maybe doing some gardening or some agriculture, and tuning into the energies of the seasons, the best time to plant, the best time to take advantage of the migration of particular types of prey, things like that. Now, if you take up the practice of astrology first and you don't get out under the sky and commune with the stars, you can still develop some benefit from that. But hopefully it's going to get you appreciating the forces behind the astrological system. Like, what kind of forces are you contacting and communicating with? So let's talk about the notion of a holiday. A holiday nowadays is very often something that's commercialized. Right now, I think we just, today even might be St. Patrick's Day, I think, I'm not sure. And I've already seen numerous ads of, oh, this is where you can go out drinking tonight, or here's how to make your beer green. And a lot of holiday time now, especially like for Christmas and things like that, and New Year's, they're very commercialized. So people take advantage of the fact that people celebrate holidays. Holidays originally were astrological events. For instance, Christmas is December 25th, which is more or less 3 days after the winter solstice. So in other words, there's a sort of death that happens at the winter solstice, and 3 days after there's a resurrection, okay, or a birth in this case, right? So 3 days after the death of the god is once again is born again. You could call it a resurrection, or just a rebirth, okay? And there are many different deities or savior deities that are supposedly born on December 25th. That's giving you one example. And these holidays largely existed because of their astrological correspondences. And celebrating the holidays was a way of communing with nature, with the natural world. If you think of sites like Stonehenge, you can very easily see how that was a major ritual center for a civilization that existed back then. And the configuration of Stonehenge was a way of aligning the community around it to the influence of the stars. And then, of course, they would have certain times of year which they could predict using the configuration of Stonehenge, and they would celebrate these various, they would have these various festivals, and those festivals would punctuate their year in regards to when to plant, when to harvest, when to take advantage of this particular migration of an animal, like say birds or some kind of livestock or something like that. So these holidays were essentially astrological events. Nowadays, holidays have lost touch with that. And one thing you can do as a magical practice is reclaim that. You can reclaim holidays that are astrological in nature, such as the summer solstice or the spring equinox. And you can then celebrate them just for what they are. This is similar to the way that a Golden Dawn student would do the 4 adorations. We celebrate 4 times during the day for sunrise, noon, sunset, and midnight. There are also 4 times of the year, which are spring, summer, fall, winter, the spring and winter solstice, spring and autumn equinoxes, and the summer solstice and the winter solstice. It's almost like there are 4 times of day, there are 4 times of the year. Okay, and these configurations, these fourfold configurations, are ways of connecting to nature and maintaining that connection to nature. Because what has happened to humans is that in their sort of egoic consciousness, they feel separate from nature. And now there's a need to connect. Okay. One of the difficulties we have when we think of astrology is, well, is it an art? Is it a science? What exactly is it? So you might want to look at what science actually is. Why does science exist? Science's main purposes are to predict behavior of the cosmos and to control things. So to predict what nature's going to do and to control nature, to be able to produce results and control it. Okay, so science in essence is kind of a control freakish kind of discipline, especially nowadays. It's becoming increasingly divorced from nature. Like if you take organic chemistry, it's mostly about configuring molecules so that you can come up with a really expensive formula that you can sell to people and you can patent it. And you can go to the Amazon and you can find something, a nature that the shamans there are using. You can find a medicine that the shamans are using, and then you can figure out what the active ingredient is, and then you can go to your lab and make a synthetic version of it and charge lots of money for it because you know how the molecules work. Okay, so science tends to be a way to control things and to take advantage of things. Mysticism is a way of connecting human beings to the cosmos. So human beings, the way we have evolved, we feel sort of estranged from nature. We're sort of outside of it, looking around us going, how is it that we've become these entities that are sort of separate from nature, and now we feel like nature is sort of doing things to us, and now we're doing things to it. The reality, of course, quite obviously, is that we are nature. We have come out of nature. We haven't come into nature from some other place, from some other universe. We have grown out of nature. And so mysticism is a way of reaffirming that and reconnecting to nature. All right, so now magic has the goal of sort of both. It's both the mysticism and the science. The goal of magic is to thrive as an individual, let's say, um, based on our connection to the natural world. So yeah, magic is a way of basically being united to the forces of nature, but also thriving because of that. Okay, so a good example of that would be getting up and then exposing yourself to the first rays of the sun as they come up over the horizon, um, and maybe also watching the sunset at night. So you really get in touch with the full cycle of your day. And this is why, the neophyte in the Golden Dawn would do the 4 adorations to get in touch with the rising sun, the sun at noon, the sunset, and the sun at midnight. It's one of those ways of getting in touch with nature. Okay, and of course, being in touch with nature supposedly empowers you. That's the essence of magic, okay? Um, so now astrology is a system. It's sort of a fourfold system, the way I've been describing, that can be used to connect to the natural world and to the sky and to the universe. Okay, and what you'll notice is that what it has become is more like it's trying to be science. That's why we call it pseudoscience, right? It's trying to be scientific, and so it's about predicting and maybe exploiting, taking advantage of the things that are going on around you. Okay, yeah. If we make it a more natural, immersive experience, then astrology could be a way of taking advantage of the energies that arise at certain times of the year, okay, or even at certain times of the day. Okay, so that's the important aspect of it, I think. Why astrology is silly, okay? It tends to be overly systematized, and it becomes a sort of mechanistic system. It kind of regards the heavens as a sort of clockwork thing going on with gears turning, and then you have the houses, which are like really sharply divided compartments from the between the two horizons. There are 12 different houses where if a planet is in a particular house at a particular time, it has a particular effect, and then suddenly it clicks over, like clunk, goes over into the next house, and then it has a different effect. Okay, and same with the signs of the zodiac, which also turn around the Earth. But if a planet is in a particular sign, it supposedly has this particular effect on what's happening below. And as you can tell, when you look at an astrological chart, it does tend to overdo it as far as trying to make a sort of clockwork, mechanistic version of the universe. Okay, so the way to rescue it from that is to see it as a language of communication. And like I said before, the psyche of the universe seems to enjoy being systematized. So when you superimpose a system on top of it, it may very likely respond and start communicating with you in terms of that system. Okay, but the importance here is that you want to focus on nature itself, or the sky itself, or the universe itself, and not necessarily get all caught up within the system, and now the system is telling you what to do. The system is merely a language of communication. Okay, so that's the important thing. So astrology becomes silly when you practice astrology just for the sake of astrology. And all you're doing is looking at your computer screen and it's telling you where the planets are, things like that, okay? Now, it doesn't mean you need to go out under the sky and practice astrology that way. What I'm saying is that there's something behind astrology. There's something out there in the world that you're trying to reconnect with, and you're using astrology to do it. And so that natural phenomenon that you are now regarding through the lens of astrology is more important than astrology itself. Okay, so even if you're not out there looking at the stars directly with your naked eyes, there is a reality out there beyond your astrological system that astrology is merely communicating with. It is a tool that you use to communicate with the external, or the supposedly external world. Okay. Now, there really isn't an external world, but you won't really realize that until you start to use astrology to communicate with it. And then you gradually begin to realize that there is no separation between me and the external world. So how is astrology valid? Well, first of all, it views the solar system as an organism. So it kind of sees everything as alive. And so it doesn't need to be seen as a sort of clockwork machine-like universe. It can be seen instead as a dynamic system in which energies come and go. They rise and fall. So there's a dynamic living system that goes through various cycles. So astrology helps you see the solar system and the universe as a living thing. I think it's preposterous nowadays that we have to propose a theory like the Gaia hypothesis and say that it's just a theory. The Gaia hypothesis is that the Earth is an organism, that it's actually alive. It's an entity. To somebody with mystical attainment or magical attainment, that's a no-brainer. There's no need to prove that. It's painfully obvious that the universe is alive. Okay, and somehow we've gotten into this modernistic psychology that regards it as dead, and that it's basically just res extensa, as Descartes said, that it's just empty space full of chunks of debris that are just floating out there. There's no soul out there. The only soul that exists is inside you, and everything outside of you is dead, pretty much, and is mechanistic. Even to the point of looking at plants and animals as though they have no soul either, and that they're just there for you to use and abuse, or to take advantage of for your capitalistic society, or something like that. Also, it regards that one of the valid things, or one of the valid principles of astrology, is that the solar system is an immense electromagnetic field. The sun fills the entire solar system with negatively charged plasma, negative and positively charged plasma. Okay, there's a big a magnetic bubble around the solar system created by the sun, a magnetic field, and within that field there's an ebbing and flowing of various currents in the plasma, and the planets, as they go around the sun, sort of stretch and tweak that electromagnetic field and cause currents in it to flow back and forth. And so the interesting thing about the valid thing about astrology is that it acknowledges the magnetic field around the sun and how that has a tendency to influence what happens here on Earth. And so if Jupiter and Mars are in a particular configuration, then that's going to have some kind of impact on the events that happen here. And science is beginning to understand this, that the solar system is not only gravitational, but also electromagnetic. And where the planets are sitting at any particular time are going to tweak that magnetic field and have an influence on what happens on Earth. How much influence? It's hard to say, but apparently mystics for several thousand years now have known about this. And of course, if you are immersed in nature, nature does tend to communicate this to you. It's hard for us to see that now because we feel so cut off from nature. Being here, I am inside my air-conditioned house, Um, and of course, if I'm trying to use astrology while in this setting, it's a bit of a challenge because I run the risk of just uh, engaging in astrology as a form of mental masturbation. And there's really no connection between me and the universe then, if I'm just engaging with it that way, like it's a game or something like that. Also, another advantage, another valid thing about astrology, and I like this one even better, and that is to view the universe and to view the solar system as not only an organism, but also a drama. Now, each of the planets has a particular character. And so, as these characters dance around one another, forming various configurations, they express various qualities within each of us. So that's also a very interesting thing to view the universe as a drama, and not only as an organism, but also as a drama. And of course, uh, in regards to Golden Dawn magic, it's not really necessary to have to go out under the stars and practice your astrological magic that way. Though it is very nice to do that. The main thing the main thing that exists beyond your, let's say you have astrology, you project a sort of astrological version of the universe around you to try to make meaning of what's happening around you. On the other side of that system that you're projecting upon the world, there are the actual spirits and gods. There are entities out there that are non-material that you can actually develop a relationship with. Okay, and so when it comes to the curriculum in the Kabbalah Magic book, primarily what that system is doing is getting you in contact with those spirits and gods of the planets, of the elements. All right. And so astrology is it's like an overlay or an intermediate zone that helps you communicate with those entities that apparently exist all around you. Uh, what kind of contact to the universe? What kind of contact do we have with the universe? Obviously, we have what happens with the four adorations, where we tune in to the sunrise, the sun at noon, sunset, and midnight, and this helps us get into a more healthy circadian rhythm, which makes us more healthy human beings. Uh, so we get into a rhythm with the sun. Not only should we do the four adorations, but we should also expose ourselves to the raw elements of nature, to sunlight, to heat and cold, to starlight, to moonlight, okay, to natural foods, actual foods, not synthetic foods, and of course to the spirits of nature that sort of exist beneath the appearances of all of these things that we are connecting to. Okay, and one of the most interesting things about astrology is that it tends to give us a way of tuning into the electromagnetic field of the universe. Since that whole electromagnetic field is constantly sort of morphing and changing because of the way the planets tend to distort or morph that magnetic field as they orbit the sun. And yes, you can get sensitive to these energies. And within those energies, it would appear that there are various intelligences that you can contact by using the configuration of astrology and using the astrological symbols or the imagery that are associated with signs of the zodiac, things like that. So astrology, if we are to rescue it from just being a game of mental masturbation, it is a language by which we can communicate with the universe, especially sort of the electromagnetic universe or the etheric universe, whatever that is. Okay. So how does this affect you in your daily magical work? Well, the student of magic draws a magic circle every day, like as in with the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram and the ritual of the hexagram. There are also the symbol of the cross, let's say the equal armed cross. In other words, that the way we have evolved tends to put us in a sort of fourfold way of looking at the world. If we are walking around in nature, we have what's directly in front of us, we have things from off to the side, and we have things from behind us. There's also above and below, okay? And so we tend to be conscious of the things that are right and left, forward and backward, and above and below. You can see that fourfold cross system tends to be the way our nervous system works. And that overlay that we sort of naturally have with the world is now taken advantage of with the various sigils and magic. So like the cross and the circle. These are the basic symbols of communication that we use to experience union with the universe. Also, the triangle, the square, these are also basic symbols that tend to carry forth a lot of meaning between us and the natural world, back and forth. Triangle, square, circle, and cross. And there are other symbols as well. And of course, the four quarters, when we're standing in our magical circle, obviously to the south, that's the quarter of fire. To the east is the quarter of air. And as you probably realize by now, the four quarters around you also are emblematic of the four seasons. Spring would be east, summer would be south, autumn would be west, and winter would be north. And so if you want to communicate with a spiritual force that corresponds to winter, like the land of the dead, things like that, you would turn to the north, and you have a sort of systematic overlay. Do the spirits of the dead really exist to the north? No, not really. But you have created this system of correspondences that helps you now tune into that. Okay, this is what astrology really is. It's a language of communication, a system of communication between you and the world. Interesting thing is that once you have established that connection, the whole system of astrology changes then. It's what's going to happen once you start to commune with the natural world, you're going to change the system of astrology and the system of magic that you have been using. You're going to start to customize it for yourself. And this is what happens when students get to the 5=6 grade. They begin to customize magic, their own magical system. This is why grimoires are usually not that helpful. They're fascinating to read, but a grimoire is essentially a system of communication that another magician came up with in order to communicate with nature and the cosmos. Okay, and that system that particular mage came up with is not necessarily going to work for you. Okay, because that person's karma was different from your karma. Okay, so when people, reach the 5=6 grade and they keep doing the same Golden Dawn stuff, in other words, now I'm going to do the higher grade systems of the Golden Dawn, I become suspicious of that. Because really by 5=6, you should start creating your own magical system. It's going to probably be similar to what people practice with astrology or, alchemy and stuff like that. It's going to have similarities, but it's going to have a lot of customization. You're going to start to make your own version of magic because now you're supposedly you're now getting in touch with the natural world and with the cosmos. That union with the universe is beginning to happen. Okay. One of the most important things about your communication with the universe is also that central axis. So when you're standing within your magical circle, the middle pillar is a very important part of that as well. And you have to remember, though, that when the most important thing is that you have that reestablished connection to the universe. So when people talk about magic and it's all about what system you're using and this system works this way and you can't change it or whatever, like, no. Once you use that system to establish your connection to the universe, then the system is no longer that important anymore. Okay, and what's going to happen is that your connection with the cosmos is then going to determine what your system of communication looks like. Okay, so I've seen it happen with students. Like they basically, you're doing the outer order work on the Golden Dawn, and you have to do everything according to the way you've been directed to do it. But eventually, something clicks, and then you begin to create your own magical system. Okay, it's not very accurate to say that because that system evolves on its own. It's not you who's deciding to create it now. It's more like your communion with the universe is now evolving a magical system that is now sort of custom fit to the way that you maintain your connection and your communication with the universe. So is astrology pseudoscience? Yes, it is. Does that mean it's invalid? No, it's up to you. Like, if you can use astrology or any system of magic for that matter to establish your union with the cosmos, then you're using it correctly, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, but if you're engaging with it for its own sake, you're just practicing astrology because astrology is cool, whatever. That's not necessarily going to be that helpful. Okay. But of course, the fool who persists in his folly will become wise. And so people who just kind of play with astrology because astrology seems cool, they can still, by accident, stumble upon union with the cosmos. Okay. Now, when I talk about uniting yourself to the cosmos, I really don't mean like reaching out and touching it and now I'm connected. Okay. If you're reaching out and touching the forces around you in the natural world, that is not the connection I'm talking about. Okay, so these various systems of magic, such as astrology, can help you experience the connection to the cosmos that you already have, not a connection that you establish by reaching out to it. Okay, so if you try to unite yourself to the universe by reaching out and touching it, you haven't understood correctly. You've missed the point. Okay, so these various systems of magic, such as astrology and other systems like tarot and whatever, they are a means of seeing the connection that was always there. If you try to establish that connection as though it's not there, you have missed the mark. And that's of course the problem, because people feel cut off, and so they try to connect to the universe by touching it. Okay, it's fine to do that, but you have to realize that if I try to go out there and run after nature and chase after it, then I'm basically caught up in a karmic cycle. I'm chasing after nature in order to unite with it. What I really should be doing is using magic to notice the connection that already exists, that somehow I've lost consciousness of. I can't seem to feel my connection anymore. That connection never went away. It's always been there. And of course, once you realize that, then things start to take off. Okay, and it's almost a very strange thing to say too, because once you establish that connection, then a system like astrology is not necessarily a communication between you and the universe, because that idea of between would be dualistic. It would indicate that you are separate from the universe. Okay, so it's not even a system of communication anymore when it's functioning properly. It just becomes a sort of natural outgrowth, the way that a flower petal connects a flower to the space around it. I don't know, something like that. Okay, so yeah, so if probably the best way to look at the universe around you is like to see your sense of separation from it as an illusion, and then any system that you use to bridge the gap between you and the cosmos is also an illusion. Okay, the system that you're using to connect yourself to the universe around you is simply a reminder of your connection, not an establisher of your connection. So if you, let's say you visualize the wheel of the zodiac around you and you visualize the various planets circling around your ritual space, these things are not connecting you to the universe per se. They are simply emblematic of your connection to it that already exists. So I'm hoping that might help. When I do these videos, I very often become worried that it just doesn't make sense. People won't understand. Okay, so and what we've just established here is that when somebody criticizes astrology, the criticism is very often valid because it tends to posit a clockwork type universe, an overly scientific universe that looks like gears in some kind of cosmic machine. And of course, that's silly because the universe isn't really like that. Now, that's a sort of steampunk version of the universe. Um, does the universe enjoy being viewed that way? To an extent, it might. It might enjoy having that system projected on top of it. But the problem results when you take that system literally, as though the system itself is the reality. No, 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 no. That overlay is simply a means of understanding what's going on around you and having that system point out your union with the cosmos that has always been there. Okay, well, I hope that makes sense. All right, so that is about, is astrology real or is it not real? Does it work? Does it not work? It does work, but the importance is to use it as a non-dual sort of philosophy. It's kind of a way of looking at your dualistic mindset as like me and the cosmos, and then the system of astrology can be used as a means of seeing the unity between you and the cosmos. If you're using a system of magic to intensify your separation from the cosmos, that's just going to make things worse in your life, pretty much. Okay. So these various systems of magic are ultimately best applied to pointing out the connection that has always been there. All right, until next time.